What is up, Formula One race fans? It's James from the Formula One Bros podcast, and we're back for another episode. This time, coming at you after the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix. I stayed up to watch it in the middle of the night, which is why I'm getting to this a little bit later than I usually do on Sunday. I stayed up, watched it. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. So I got up, I watched it, and then immediately went right back to bed. So I'm coming at you a little bit later than usual. But today we're going to talk all things about the Chinese Grand Prix race weekend. I have a list of my takeaways from the weekend. So I'm not going to do like a race review lap by lap. Here's what happened, because hopefully you guys watched the race. If you haven't, go watch it. I'm just here to talk about my takeaways from the race weekend. I don't have as many takeaways as I did last week. Last week I had like 8 takeaways from Australia, but that was because that was the first race of the season. We're 2 races down now. I don't have that many takeaways. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive right in. So this weekend we were in Shanghai, China. It's fun having it this early in the season. I think typically in the past, it's usually been the 3rd or 4th race, not the 2nd race in March. So it's cool having it this early. It was a bit warmer than they were used to having it this weekend, but yeah, it's nice having it this weekend, and it's cool having the first 2 races back to back, which was really nice. After this weekend, they go to Japan, which I think it's cool. This year they've laid out the schedule geographically, which I think is really, really awesome. So far I've been enjoying the first 3 races: Australia, China, Japan, all 3 great racetracks that produce a lot of really great racing. So we are in for a treat for these first 3 races. And I personally thought, as a whole, I thought the Chinese Grand Prix was a good race. I thought it was a good race. It definitely had its exciting moments. It definitely had its moments where I was like, okay, a little bit boring, but most Formula One races are like that. I will say, and this is one thing I do want to mention. I forgot about it, but I wanted to talk about it. I didn't write it down. It's not one of my takeaways. But for a majority of the race, the pack from the leaders of Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, the 2 McLarens, down to the back of the grid, with the exception of what happened with the Kick Saubers, the racing seemed a lot closer. I will say that the front, like between the McLarens, Max Verstappen, the Ferraris, and George Russell in the Mercedes, they were pretty close. There was a little bit of separation in the middle, kind of right around where the Racing Bulls were. And so there was a little bit of gap to them. And then after the Racing Bulls, there was a little bit of a gap. And then the back of the pack was actually pretty close for pretty much the whole race. That back from like Isaac and Yuki on back, they were pretty close the whole race, which is really, really cool. I think as these new ground effect cars that we got starting in 2022 up until now, they've been developing and everything, the racing has gotten actually a lot closer, which I really like. And I thought that I was having a really, really fun time watching the back of the pack, the last, the quote back markers, kind of duking it out a little bit for pretty much the whole race, which was really, really fun to watch. But overall, I thought the racing was pretty close between the front drivers and the back drivers. Was pretty close. It was not like the racing that we had seen in like 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, where, the front drivers would just get 30 seconds ahead, or at least the leader get 30 seconds ahead, and there was a gap, car, another 5-6 seconds, car, another 5-6 seconds. It was a lot closer, and so far these first 2 races they have been a lot closer, which I think is really cool. So that's one thing I really appreciate about this race. I really enjoyed watching that. So diving right into my race weekend takeaways here in China, and I'm going to start off with the elephant of the room. get it off my chest. Just get it out in the open first. We have to talk about Liam Lawson and the whole Red Bull situation with what's happening with them right now. Red Bull, my takeaway that I have written down, Red Bull's issues with their second driver. Now, I posted a TikTok about this earlier today, but it sounds like there's some rumblings coming out of the F1 world that Liam Lawson could potentially be replaced at Red Bull as early as Japan, which is the next race. It is the next race. In fact, I think they do have a weekend off between now and the next race. Let me actually think. Yes, they do have a weekend off. So we have one weekend between now and between Japan. So they have 2 weeks until we go racing in Japan. But that's not a long time between now and then. But Japan is the next race, and there are rumors that are coming out that Liam Lawson could potentially be replaced at Red Bull by then. I don't know how credible that is. I don't know if Red Bull will actually pull the trigger on that. Well, there are a couple things about this whole Red Bull situation. The first thing I want to mention, and a lot of people are saying like, oh, Liam Lawson's a bad driver, kind of blaming Liam Lawson. I don't think it's Liam Lawson's fault. In fact, I don't think it was Checo's fault. I don't think it was Alex Albon's fault. I don't think it was Pierre Gasly's fault. Any of Red Bull's second drivers that they've had since Daniel Ricciardo left in 2018 into the 2019 season when he went to Renault. All of the issues that Red Bull have had since 2019, I don't believe that it was ever the driver's fault. That car Max Verstappen has a very, very particular driving style. He likes the car to have a lot of front end, meaning you turn the steering wheel and man, that thing goes. It is very much on edge, so much so like the sensitivity is so high, and that's how Max likes his car. But he's like the only driver on the grid that is like that. All the other drivers like a more smooth driving style. So Max is a very particular driving style. And here's where Red Bull's gotten this wrong. They have completely set up that car for Max and have completely left the second drivers out to dry. So that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. But I mean, it is a pretty big problem. Now, there have been some people who are like, well, yeah, design the car for Max. But the problem with that, though, is, as I just said, Max has such a unique style of driving. Alex Albon, in an interview, he was talking about a couple of years ago, he was talking about his time at Red Bull and why there's such a difference in that car and why he was struggling so much. And he described it as like you putting putting the mouse sensitivity on your computer all the way up, and you like just move the mouse and that mouse is darting all over the screen. He said, now that level of sensitivity times 1,000, and that's how Max likes his car. And that type of car is really, really difficult to drive. And he said, as you're going through, as the season goes on, the more sensitive he likes it, the more front end the sharper he wants the front end as the season goes on. And he said, as a driver who likes a smoother, who has a smoother style of driving, it makes it, as the season goes on, you get more and more tense, and then you have to to keep up with Max, you have to push the boundaries more and more. And then you have a crash. And then you have less confidence, but you have to keep pushing the car. And he said it just builds up so much tension and it's not a very good style of driving. So that's the main problem that Red Bull has, is they have designed that car solely around Max, but Max is such a unique style of driving that no one else has. So that's where that problem starts. The other problem that they have, and I have this written down, they also have absolutely no interest in developing young drivers. Well, I'll amend that slightly. They may not have an interest, but they are not doing a very good job. So the whole point of Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, previously AlphaTauri, previously Toro Rosso, that team was founded as a development team for Red Bull Racing. Okay. And they were expecting, the Red Bull was just expecting, hey, you develop the drivers and then we'll take them, which in theory works really, really well. But, they're a team they're their own independent team as well. And they're trying also to get the best drivers that they can into that. And yes, it's part of the Red Bull Academy. They get Red Bull drivers in there and everything. But, we have seen non-Red Bull drivers go to there because of, contracts and money and all this kind of stuff, and them wanting to get the best drivers that they can get, to race for them. So it was founded as a development team, but right now it's not necessarily working as one, as at least it should. So that's part of the issue. But think about, let's go back. Let's rewind all the way back to Red Bull's inception in 2000, and it was either 2005 or 2000. I think it was 2005. Red Bull's inception. The drivers that they got, David Coulthard and Mark Webber. At the time, both of those drivers were very good and very well-established drivers. David Coulthard had been driving for quite a while. Mark Webber had been driving for quite a while. They had been in Formula One for quite a while already. Okay. Then flash forward to 2009. 2009, at the end of the 2008 season, David Coulthard retires. Mark Webber stays. So they have a veteran driver, and they hire for the 2009 season Sebastian Vettel. Well, at the time, Sebastian Vettel was this young new driver, but was he really a new driver? Not really. He had gotten his start in 2005 with BMW, and then had a couple seasons under his belt at Toro Rosso. So he started in 2005. This is 2009. So he had the 2005, 6, 7, and 8. He had 4 seasons of Formula One under his belt before he even made it into a Red Bull seat. So in 2009, Mark Webber again had been there since its inception, since Red Bull's inception. And then they hired Sebastian Vettel, who was already at that time an experienced driver. And that lineup lasts from 2009. They had him in 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. Okay. Then Mark Webber retires. Then they get Daniel Ricciardo. Well, Daniel Ricciardo had been racing in Formula One since 2011 when they hired him in 2014. So again, 2011, 2012, 2013. He had 3 years of Formula One under his belt already when they hired him. He was not a new driver. He was not a new driver. And in the case of both Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo, both exceptional talent, once in a generation drivers. They were already extremely talented. They did not need to be developed because they were already incredibly talented when they came to Red Bull. And even when they came to Formula One, they were already incredibly talented. So Daniel Ricciardo and Sebastian Vettel, that lasts from 2014. 2015, we have, this is kind of when Red Bull kind of goes through a period of struggle in 2015, because Sebastian Vettel leaves. Daniel Ricciardo is still very successful, but they go through a couple drivers with Daniel Kvyat, a couple other drivers, and then eventually they land in 2016. They land on Max Verstappen. Okay, Daniel Ricciardo is still at the team. Very much a proven race winner, very talented, gets them a lot of points. Max Verstappen, okay, yes, he was very young. And you could say he was young. He was a very young driver. and also did not have that much experience in Formula One. However, when he did come into Formula One in the 2014-15 season, he was already incredibly talented. Everyone knew that he was incredibly talented. Everyone knew that he was going to be the next Red Bull driver. Okay. He was already incredibly talented, incredibly quick. When he was racing at Toro Rosso, he was already putting that car in places where that car should not even be. So he's already extremely talented. When he got to Red Bull, his first race in Red Bull, in a comparative to the other cars that season, like Mercedes, who were incredibly dominant in 2016, his first debut in 2016 in Spain won. He won his debut at Red Bull. So, and then they had, from 2016 all the way up until 2019, they had Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo. So Red Bull has either had incredibly experienced drivers or incredibly talented drivers. The point of that whole thing was they haven't really needed to develop drivers. And so they don't really know how to develop drivers. They put in 2019 up until now, they have put, with the exception of Checo, they have put relatively young, relatively inexperienced drivers in that car, expecting them to deliver at least close to Max Verstappen. Well, of course that's never going to happen. One, because Max Verstappen, again, is incredibly talented. There's no driver on the grid right now that is as talented as Max Verstappen. Okay, there simply is none. I think the closest drivers right now, I would say, are, you have Lando Norris is up there. Lewis Hamilton, of course, the 7-time world champion, is up there. But Lewis Hamilton, he's still incredibly talented and showing that he is very quick, but he's getting up there in age. I think Charles Leclerc is very talented. Unfortunately, he's in a Ferrari, so it's hard to say truly how talented he is. But I mean, arguably, Max Verstappen is the most talented driver on the grid right now. So of course, any driver that they put in that second seat is going to be nowhere near close. Well, Red Bull comes in with the expectation, okay, you need to deliver. But also, they have a car that's incredibly hard to drive. And now more so this year, because even Max Verstappen's like, this car is really hard to drive. And so fast forward to this current season when we're dealing with Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson last year had half the season at then AlphaTauri, now Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. He had half the season there and proved to be a very, very talented driver. He is a very talented driver. So all of this to say, my initial point, I don't necessarily think it's Liam Lawson's fault. I don't think it was ever Checo's fault. I don't think it was ever Alex Albon's fault. I don't think it was ever Pierre Gasly's fault. That car is just incredibly hard to drive. Liam Lawson is incredibly talented. But his situation, all of those points that I made, all of those are compounding onto Liam Lawson right now. He is in a team that doesn't really know how to, nor has any interest in developing drivers. He's in a team that is solely focused on Max Verstappen and only builds the car around Max Verstappen. So he's in a car that's incredibly hard to drive. And he, relatively speaking, is pretty young. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience, and he's expected to perform relatively close to Max Verstappen. So it sucks that he is put in this position. It sucks that he's put in this place. And honestly, I think of any driver that deserves to be in that seat, it's either Checo Perez or Yuki Tsunoda. But even if they were to put Yuki Tsunoda in the car in Japan, I don't think he's going to do very well just because of that car. So, it's a really, really big shame that Red Bull are in the position that they're in. Now, they have a decision to make. Okay. Do they listen to Liam's input and try to get a car that works for both drivers to get Liam up to where he needs to be? Or do they just keep all of their eggs into one basket? with Max Verstappen. But if I have a feeling if they do that, then they're just not going to have, they're going to be competing in championship with one driver when everyone else is competing with two. There is no way that Red Bull is going to be close to the constructors or drivers championship when they're competing against the likes of McLaren. Even with Ferrari having the first two races that they've had, even up until they were disqualified, they proved that they had pace. And they're going to be very, very difficult to beat once they kind of get these first couple race the kinks out of that car. Once they work those out, they're going to be incredibly tough to beat. And they're doing it with one driver. And so they are not going to be competitive at all if they put all their eggs into one basket, but they're not going to be competitive either if they, try to change things up and try to build a car that suits both drivers. So Red Bull have kind of put themselves into a box, unfortunately. And eventually Max Verstappen's going to retire. And I wholeheartedly believe that if Max Verstappen were not in that car, but they have the car that they have, but Max Verstappen were not driving there, they'd be a back marker. They 100% would be a back marker. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. They would be a back marker. They'd be worse off than Haas and Kick Sauber are at the moment. I truly believe that. So anyway, that is all I'm going to say about Red Bull. I know I'm being very, very critical of Red Bull, and it's kind of funny that I'm being extremely critical of Red Bull wearing a Ferrari shirt, but don't worry, Ferrari will get to you. The next takeaway that I have, kind of going on the opposite of driver development from Red Bull, I have to say Mercedes. I have 2 points to make with Mercedes. One, as we all remember when they had that experiment in 2022 of the zero side pod, they had built a terrible, terrible car. I think they have started to really dig themselves out of that hole that they dug themselves into in 2022. That car looks incredibly quick. George Russell was strong all weekend long. He had incredible race pace, and now so far he's gotten 2 podiums. Mercedes have really, really dug themselves out of that hole, and I don't think that they've built a car to compete with the championship yet. Keyword yet. But they are definitely on the right path, and if they can get some really good upgrade packages that stick, I think they could be serious contenders down line towards the end of the season, especially if with the big question mark over Ferrari. Classic Ferrari doing classic Ferrari things. So I think Mercedes have a real shot at being contenders at the end of the season. So that's my first takeaway. It seems like they've dug themselves out of the hole that they put themselves in 2022. But speaking of driver development that I was talking about with Red Bull, Mercedes are doing driver development right. Okay, especially after when they first started, they had Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton starting in 2013, and they had them all the way up until 2016. And then 2017, they had Valtteri Bottas, who was a very, very quick, very talented driver. They had no issues with Valtteri. And then with Valtteri, they brought in George Russell. They they trusted Williams to develop George and gave George a lot of opportunities in Mercedes before he even got that seat. So, and now when George Russell did get that seat at Mercedes, they developed him very, very well. And the good thing, and I'm going to talk about this purely as I'm a teacher. And what Mercedes have done as a teacher aspect, because if you're going to develop a driver, you're essentially a teacher. So if you're developing a driver, you essentially take on that role of being the teacher. And as an educator, the way that they have developed these drivers is such a good way that they've gone about this. They give them room to fail. They also, what they do is they make sure that the drivers are set up the best that they can be going into a race weekend. All the team at Mercedes, they do a great job of coaching the drivers and coaching them up to the level where now we're seeing with George Russell. He's an incredibly talented. He was already an incredibly talented driver, but Mercedes have coached him up and helped him to now he's even better than what he was before. And he was already an incredibly talented driver. And now we have Kimi Antonelli. Now today, Kimi Antonelli finished, I believe it was, hold on, I had it up on my phone. Kimi Antonelli finished in, here it is, Kimi Antonelli. He ended up finishing in 6th place. Now with George Russell on the podium, in 3rd and Kimi in 6th. Kimi Antonelli I think he has a lot of potential in him. He has got a ton of potential. But what's really cool about his situation with Mercedes is they're working really closely with him to make sure that they can extract every ounce of potential out of Kimi. And they are doing that really, really well. And it seems like Kimi is in a very good situation as a work environment. You know, they are treating him really well. They respect him. But what they're doing is they're also giving him room and space to fail, which as a teacher, I feel like the way we learn as humans and as students learn best is from failing. And I, as a teacher, you know, take that practice into the classroom, and I that's how I teach. You know, I like, let's try something. And if we fail, cool, we learned a way not to do something, and then we can try something new. And they are giving Kimi the room to do that. And they're encouraging him, which to me, seems like Kimi has a ton of confidence, not only in himself, but the car, and a ton of confidence in the team. And so Mercedes are doing driver development right. They did that with George Russell. They did that with Valtteri Bottas, and they're doing that with Kimi. And so Mercedes are doing an incredible job of developing incredibly talented drivers. And I think Kimi Antonelli, he's once George Russell, you know, George Russell still's got a lot of time left in him, a lot of racing. But I think, you know, Kimi and George are I think they're locked in as Mercedes drivers. You know, they're both extremely talented, and the way that they're already developing Kimi, hats off to you, Mercedes. You're doing it right. And so I've been very impressed with Mercedes over these past 2 races. I think this is going to be a very good season for them. So that's takeaway number 2. Takeaway number 3. I have 3 and 4 are kind of along the same, but it's 2 different teams. Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, they're sneaky good this year. They're doing really well. They've had, I believe both races had both drivers in Q3. I know that was the case in Australia, but I can't totally remember. With Yuki Tsunoda and Isaac Hadjar both, for Australia and in China were both in Q3. Now the race didn't end that way. I believe, let's see, where's the grid? There we go. Isaac Hadjar finished 11th and Yuki Tsunoda finished 16th. So not a great race for them, unfortunately. I think some strategy worked into that a little bit. But so yes, their race wasn't great. Both drivers started in Q3, started in the top 10, finished outside the points, but they're still proved to they're a good team. They're a good team, and once they can get that race pace worked out, I think they're going to be great. So they're going to be a team to look out for towards the end of the year. You know, and what a great start for Isaac as well. What a great start for Isaac. Both sessions made into Q3, and this weekend he finished 11th. I believe he also finished, where did he finish in Australia? But he finished 11th, just outside the points here in China, which was really, really, really awesome as a rookie driver. I got to go back to Australia to see where he finished. See where the grid. Let's see, where is this? Here we go. Australia. Isaac Hadjar finished Oh, that's right. In Australia, he DNF'd. That's right. He had DNF'd. But even though he had DNF'd, he still had qualified really well. So Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, they are off to a really, really good start. And another team that is off to a really good start, which I had said before the season started that they were going to be really, really bad, Haas. Wow. What a weekend for them. Both Esteban Ocon and Ali Behrman finishing 5th and 8th respectively. Now, I do know that they were helped out a little bit by the disqualification of both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, which I'll talk about that in a sec. But you take those out, that's still 7th and 10th. Both drivers finished in the points, even before the disqualification. So really, really great start. And they had a pretty good start in Australia too. So Ali Behrman is another, him and Kimi Antonelli and Isaac Hadjar are, of the 6 rookies, the 3 that are really, really impressing me. I mean, we saw last year what Ali Behrman could do in that Ferrari, finishing in the points with it as his Formula One debut in a Ferrari at the most difficult track, which is Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. But man, hats off to Haas and both Haas and Ali Behrman, both drivers finishing in the points today. They are really, really, really solid at the start of this season. Now, again, there's a lot of season left, and I have no idea. We don't know what's gonna happen. But in terms of where they're at right now, especially after this weekend, hats off to Haas. They have had a great, great start to the season. And as well, I don't have this, but as well, another team that's had a great start to the season, Williams. They've been awesome. Carlos Sainz struggled a little bit in today's race, but I believe I got to scroll back. Got to look at the finishing grid. Alex Albon, he finished all the way up into 7th, and Carlos Sainz finished 10th. So again, another team where that I thought they were going to be. I expected Williams to be a lot quicker this year, but both drivers finishing in the points, man. Both Haas and Williams off to a fantastic start. Now, my last takeaway, got to talk about it. Another big elephant in the room. We got to talk about what happened with Ferrari. Got to talk about what happened with Ferrari. My takeaway is Ferrari, the good, the bad, the ugly about this weekend. So I'm going to start off with the bad. Because I do think there were some good things that happened with Ferrari this weekend, some good things that we saw. But so far has just been overshadowed by the fact that we end with this goose egg. Their strong race pace, their strong finish doesn't matter because both drivers qualified. They walk away with no points. Well, they did have some points from the sprint race, but no points from the race. So start off with the bad. I think both those, from what I understand from what happened with those disqualifications, they were completely preventable. Charles's, at the end of the race, Charles's car went in for weighing, and it was a kilogram underweight. That is a problem that is completely preventable. It's completely preventable. Now, Lewis's car, the deck of the car, they had a lot of it had been scraped off. That I don't know the cause of that, but so I'm not totally sure how that could be fixed, or whether or not it was preventable for this weekend. But yikes. Yeah, Ferrari, it's not a good look. Did not have a good weekend in Australia. Had a good weekend here up until you get disqualified. So Ferrari, Ferrari are doing, it seems like Ferrari right now are doing everything that they can to shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to competing for the champion. Ferrari is not a team that is ready to compete for a title. They are not ready to do it. They have the best. I still think that Charles and Lewis are the strongest driver lineup, but they are just consistently screwing them over, whether it's on strategy or giving them a car that is terrible, or it was a car that's good but completely mess up the setup. It is just one thing after another with Ferrari, and it's not fun. As a Ferrari fan, it is not fun. Other thing, as of now, with that really disappointing finish, they're tied with Williams, but they're classified behind Williams because they did not finish the race. So Williams today had both drivers finish in the points, and both Ferrari drivers got disqualified. So Williams right now is classified ahead of Ferrari, and even they are also behind Red Bull, and has had one driver not even score a single point yet, who has qualified dead last in both races that we've had so far. It's just not good for Ferrari, and they're only 3 points ahead of Haas. They're only 3 points ahead of Haas. 3. So not a really, really good result. Had they finished where they were, they would let's actually do the math. They would have finished 5th and 6th, which that would have given them enough points to be definitely ahead of Williams. I think if I'm doing the math in my head right, that would have put them ahead of Red Bull. They would be in 3rd in the constructors. But right now, they are sitting in 5th, barely ahead of Haas, right behind Williams. So not a good look for Ferrari with how strong this weekend was, because we can't forget there was good that came out of this weekend for Ferrari, which is what the next thing I'm going to talk about. I mean, you can't ignore Lewis Hamilton winning the sprint race. Charles Leclerc did finish 4th, but man, what a drive from Lewis Hamilton to win the sprint race. Qualified on pole for it, won the sprint race. And the other good that came from this weekend, Ferrari, when they did finish, they finished behind both Max Verstappen and George Russell, so they're 5th and 6th. But for majority of the race, I think had Charles not had that front wing incident in the first lap, and had he had an actually fully functional front wing, I think he would have been a lot more competitive towards the end of the race. And I think had they had done the strategy a little bit better, I think it would have turned out better for them. But that whole first lap, and I think that they were right in not replacing Charles's front wing, because he was still quick. He was still really quick. So I think not replacing the front wing, I think was the right move. But they were a lot quicker this weekend. They seemed a lot quicker, and the gap between them and McLaren, I still think that Ferrari is the second quickest team. I still think that Ferrari as a team is the second quickest, as a full team, because is Max Verstappen quicker than the Ferraris? Yes. Is George Russell quicker than the Ferraris? Yes. But as a team, again, because it takes 2 drivers to win a Constructors' Championship, I think they're the second quickest team. I do. I truly believe that. And the gap between them and McLaren was a lot closer this weekend. Right now, that McLaren's a freaking rocket ship. But the gap between them and McLaren was a lot closer. So they did good in learning from what happened in Australia and applying that to China, and fixing this setup and changing some things, and doing that in just 1 week. Very, very good for Ferrari. So that was really good. And I think they did the strategy right. I think pitting Lewis Hamilton and with a 2-stop, I think that was the right move. And not in having Charles do a one stop and not replacing his front wing, I also think that was the right move. So I think Ferrari did good with the strategy this weekend, and they were a lot quicker in terms of race pace this weekend. So it was an improvement from last week. So there is good that it came out of this weekend for Ferrari, but it sucks that it was bookended by just getting disqualified from the race. And it seems like it was all for naught. It wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth anything because they didn't get any points. They didn't finish the race. Well, they finished the race, but they got disqualified in the end. So there's still a lot that Ferrari needs to do to work out those kinks in order to seriously compete for a championship. It's there. They just have to put it all together. They have the ingredients to make this beautiful, beautiful meal. They're just not following the instructions. They're just not doing it. So that's really unfortunate for them. But I again, like I mentioned with Haas, it is early. It is early in the season. A lot can happen in a Formula One season. So I do think that this car for Ferrari is better than their car last year. And their car last year was really strong. I think they got unlucky. I think there's a little bit of unluckiness this weekend. I think a lot, the disqualifications, I think mostly could have been prevented. But this weekend did show that there were improvements that were made in just one weekend. So imagine what they do when they can have a couple weeks to get upgrades into the car and so on and so forth. So I'm not counting Ferrari out yet. But if we're having this same conversation every weekend and it's like mid-June or July and we're having this conversation, then yeah, Ferrari's cooked. But right now, I'm not saying that Ferrari is cooked. I'm not pressing the panic button yet or anything like that. But yeah, not a great look for Ferrari. So those are my takeaways from the race weekend. As always, if you have any thoughts or opinions that you'd like to share, please let us know down in the comments. What were your takeaways from the race? What did you all think? And what are you guys looking forward to when we get to Japan? Another track that is really, really awesome. I love the racetrack in Japan. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. So let us know down in the comments what you thought about the Chinese Grand Prix, and we will look forward to seeing you after the Japanese Grand Prix.